Hi, what I want to do this morning is go through Night and Fog, not all of it, but enough of it to explain a few things to you um, about how the quiz went, those kinds of things. The first thing I want to do, let's just skip through some of this. I don't know why it's doing that, but listen to that flute music. Most of you realize that that is sort of happy thing. And I think that that's something that we all caught, that it was very happy. Black and white makes it seem like today, which I'm not sure if anybody, I think a few of you mentioned that. Today's world where everything is filmed in black and white, where everything is green on the scale of things, and blue. But yet we have these barbed wires, so there's this disconnect there between the happy sounds, the pretty faces, the pretty nature, and then all of a sudden barbed wire. Okay. Let's move along a little bit because I don't want to dwell on all of this. You guys have already watched it. Then there's this change to black and white. Let me put on the sound again. Doesn't that sound ominous? I mean, it sounds to me like a 1950s movie where they wanted to show drama. And that they did a lot through music that way. So notice too here how it changes back to that kind of happy flute music, and how it goes back to black and white because they're talking, or color because they're talking about today. Parmi les aboiements des chiens, les éclairs des projecteurs, avec au loin la flamme du crématoire. Okay, let's move along. And then we get all the terrible images. Right here, this image right here is night and fog. And I asked you, what do you think night and fog means? And many of you said scary, fearful. And yep, it is scary and fearful. But fog also, when you drive in the fog, what happens? You can't see. And it not only means that the Jews weren't able to see well in the camps, but it means that they didn't see what was coming. They were in the dark about what was going to happen to them. They didn't believe that a country, that a man, that a government would actually annihilate them. And for many people, they didn't understand it till they got to the concentration camps. And notice the fog. Notice the night. When you read Night this coming week, there's going to be a section where Wiesel says, "Never shall I forget that night." And night means to him the darkness. As you're reading the book Night, think about how many times Wiesel says night. Things happened at night. The darkness of night. Think about all these things happening at night because the Germans didn't want people to see. Auschwitz, especially Auschwitz, was right in the middle of a city. And people saw these prisoners being marched out of Auschwitz to their work every day. And these people outside, these German people, had to wonder, if not know, what the Germans were doing to those people. What would a ragtag bunch of skinny people be doing, march through the streets to get to their work? Let's move on. Okay, now we're into the disturbing images that I asked you about. They're terrible images. These are people barely breathing. These are people that are He's probably dead. I'm sorry, but he's probably dead. He's died in his sleep. The surgical block they mention, of course, is in a clinic. And notice how they use color here, because they want it to seem like, oh, surgical block, okay, they're taken care of, bright and sunny. But then they show these disturbing images after it. We go on. I don't want to show you all those disturbing images again. But those are all the things they collected from the Jews. These are all of them sleeping. This is a wide picture of the camp. And basically that's what I wanted to tell you about Night and Fog, and kind of finish on that. As you begin reading Night, and we begin talking about night, I want you to look for passages in there that are almost poetic. Wiesel not only writes a memoir, a story that's a slice of his past, not his whole life, but just these few years where this horrible thing happened to him and his family. And I want you to look for pieces, little vignettes in there that are almost poetic as you read. Underline them, think about it. Think about how he uses language to express a point. The one most people turn to and think about think about and say is actually a poem is fairly early in the book, when he and his family are taken to Auschwitz. And he writes, "Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, that turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never I shall forget the faces of children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consume my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God Himself. Never." This small passage is sort of the summary of the book. And it's also related very well to the film we watched, Night and Fog. The first night in camp, the smoke, the faces of the children, the flames, the silence. Think about all those things as you read Night, and think about those passages that are almost poetic. I want you to think about the book as a memoir, as a story of a person, and he wrote this almost immediately after he left camp. He wrote it in his native language, Yiddish. In fact, Night is part of a book that was about 1,000 pages long, and he took this part and fixed it up for, edited it for a publisher when he was an adult, but he wrote it as a child. So the images and the truths and the ideas are there. So think of the way he uses language. Think of the way the language manipulates you. Think of how the world must know ties into this. And pull all these things together as you're writing about Night this week.